driving here today, I couldn't but think of the 20 school children who were so brutally taken from us in Newtown, Connecticut back in 2012. It's unfortunate, and I would add unacceptable, that in 2018 our schools are still a place that we need to come together to discuss gun safety. When I was growing up, we used to have air raid drills, and now we have active shooter drills. Something is wrong with that. It's unfortunate that tragedies like those in Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe have reminded us of this painful reality, a reality reinforced by a Republican Congress in Washington that puts the NRA over the safety of our children. So again, I want to thank the student leaders who are with us today. When the youth of America speaks, I believe the adults of America should listen, and your voices have never mattered more. We already have seen too much gun violence, too much suicide, and my God, too many young people slaughtered in mass shootings. Now we're facing a new frontier in the gun violence epidemic, a threat posed by plastic 3D printed guns that are untraceable, undetectable, and completely unaccountable. I think we can all agree that it doesn't matter if a gun is made from metal, from plastic, or some combination of metal and plastic. If it loads like a gun, if it shoots like a gun, if it kills like a gun, then it must be regulated like a gun. Last week, the Trump administration, and I had the Secretary of State, and the reason that he's involved in this is because anything that can potentially be considered an export is subject to the State Department's overview. And there was litigation going on with this company that actually wants to put online, at the click of a mouse, the ability to download the internet address for the creation of these 3D plastic guns. We had barred that from happening for over a decade, and that was the right decision to make. All of a sudden, in this litigation, which the government was winning at every point, all of a sudden there was a decision by the administration to settle the case, a case that they were winning at every level, and permit the Internet Protocol addresses they could have downloaded anywhere in the United States and any terrorist across the globe a 3D pattern for a printable gun. These blueprints go online for the world to see, for criminals to see, for terrorists to see, for future mass shooters to see. To call the administration's actions irresponsible would be too kind. It's appalling. It's a reckless abandonment of our government's first responsibility, which is to keep the American people safe. Already, it's too easy for guns to fall in the wrong hands in this country. It's too easy for someone on the terrorist watch list to actually be able to buy a gun. It's too easy with someone with a history of violent behavior or domestic abuse to get a gun. And now, thanks to the Trump administration, it would even be easier. These so-called ghost guns are as terrifying as they sound. They can pass through metal detectors undetected. They have no serial numbers, so law enforcement can't trace them. And anyone with access to a three-dimensional printer can make themselves a firearm with no background check at all. I led an effort in the Senate to stop this nightmare from becoming a reality. First, when the Secretary of State was before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, challenging him to change the administration's decision, and then going to the floor of the United States Senate to ask for immediate passage of two bills I want to talk about here with my colleague, Senator Nelson of Florida, who has suffered firsthand the consequences of the loss of young people in his state, as well as Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, who also has suffered the loss of young people from his state. But asking for unanimous consent to bring the bills directly to the floor so a vote could be taken in a timely manner that could stop the administration from moving forward with making these three-dimensional protocols public, Republicans stood in the way and objected. They are refusing to consider two key pieces of legislation, the 3D Printing Safety Act and the Untraceable Firearms Act of 2018, that could help us better protect our schools and our families from the dangers of do-it-yourself downloadable guns. And while I'm glad that a federal court ordered the company behind these blueprints, Defense Distributed, to take them down, and I'm very proud to see that New Jersey's Attorney General joined in that effort, a temporary order is just that, temporary. And I fear the damage done to the safety of our schools and the security of our country can be permanent. This has become a bell that cannot be unrung once you post it. Indeed, even the blueprint for an AR-15, the weapon used in the Parkland school shooting, is available if these prints go up by terrorists, extremists, criminals, domestic abusers, you name it. The fault here lies with the Trump administration. They opened a Pandora's box of new threats that our local law enforcement will have to deal with for years to come if we do not succeed. Now, some have naively claimed that there's no reason for concern because 3D printers are too expensive for the average Joe. Well, they clearly haven't been paying attention to the dizzying pace of innovation transforming our world. It wasn't so long ago that it cost hundreds of dollars to get an HD video camera. Today I have one on my iPhone and I can FaceTime with my granddaughter anytime I want. A decade ago, 3D printers weighed hundreds of pounds and cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Today, for a few $100, you can put one on your desk. The next generation is more tech savvy than ever. Children are learning how to code in grade school. Preteens have written best-selling apps, and 3D printing has tremendous potential for medicine, for manufacturing, and so much more. There's an incredible educational value to 3D printing as well. Schools purchase them so that students can design works of art and discover the innovators inside them. The bottom line is that with new technology comes new responsibility. We cannot let innovation render our background check system or federal gun safety laws obsolete. Due to the gun industry's grip on Congress, we've already failed to keep our kids as safe as we could. Gun-related injuries are now the third leading cause of death among America's children. We must do more to keep guns away from our kids and out of the hands of those who would do them harm. And that includes guns you can print off of the internet. We're approaching 6 months since 17 students were murdered in Parkland, and this president has done absolutely nothing to save lives. Instead, his administration has put more children in danger. How can my colleagues in Congress stand by as this administration opens the biggest loophole in our federal gun laws ever? A loophole that lets anyone who wants a gun to print a gun with no federal background check at all. Enough is enough. These ghost guns are untraceable, they are undetectable, and that makes them unacceptable. It's time we strengthen our background check system, not give criminals the digital tools they need to get around it. It's time we get weapons of mass murder off of our streets, not give gangs permission to print their own. It's time we stop suspected terrorists from buying weapons, not equip them with the blueprints to build them. They say actions have consequences. Well, I believe it's time we send a message to our colleagues in Washington that inaction has consequences too. And those consequences include the loss of American lives, the deaths of innocent children, and even more heartbreak for the American people. We can't let that happen. We have to take action. And we're hoping that the American people, who are getting into this very much and are beginning to understand it very quickly, will rise up, speak to their members of the Senate and the House, insist on legislation that outlaws these particular guns that are untraceable, undetectable. Why are we spending billions of dollars at our airports across the country to create safety when you can create an undetectable plastic gun that goes into somebody's luggage or suitcase or carry-on? You break it apart, you reassemble it, and it's undetectable because there's no metal to set it off. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense.